Rosalia sat on the chair, her face half covered as if hiding from her own thoughts. Her voice was soft, almost embarrassed, when she spoke. She said it wasn't that she hadn't been paying attention, she simply couldn't control it yet. The Duke stood in front of her, his head lowered, close enough for her to feel his presence. In his mind, a single thought surfaced: it was her fault this moment even existed. And yet he didn't step back. Instead, with a faint smile, he asked if he should help her with that. His tone was light, almost teasing, as his hand lifted her chin. Startled, Rosalia's hands went to her hair, fingers tightening as she tried to steady herself. She admitted that whatever he was doing was only making things more difficult for her. The Duke leaned in closer, his voice lowering. He asked what exactly was so difficult. It wasn't as if she had never seen someone before, and from the way her body reacted, it clearly didn't seem like she disliked him. He moved closer still, until their lips were barely apart, and quietly said her name. Rosalia quickly placed her hand over his lips, her head lowered, her voice barely audible as she confessed that she didn't dislike him. The Duke paused, then questioned her with mock seriousness. Dislike him? Was she being serious? Her cheeks turned red as she looked away. She asked what was so strange about disliking him, and addressed him formally, reminding him that she had no intention of doing anything like that with him, at least not right now. The Duke smiled, gently removing her hand from his lips. He remarked that the words, "right now," sounded a lot like she was leaving the door open for later. Rosalia shut that thought down immediately and refused. To her surprise, the Duke let go of her hand and stepped back. He said calmly that if she said no, he wouldn't force her. That response confused her. She hadn't expected him to back down so easily. As if the moment before hadn't been charged at all, the Duke turned his attention to an official document. Casually, he added that she no longer needed to pay back the debt. She had already done enough. Rosalia stammered her thanks but refused the offer. She insisted she would repay the remaining amount soon. The Duke glanced at the paper in his hand, clearly unsurprised. He said he had known she would answer that way, adding that no one could ever argue with her. Even the head of the Yorks seemed to agree. Rosalia immediately warned him to be careful with his words. If he slipped and called her by name in front of others, it would be a disaster. The Duke looked at her then, a quiet warmth in his eyes, as if he was already choosing when and where he would say her name again. The Duke nodded lightly and said he would do that. Rosalia watched him, puzzled. What's with him today? She wondered. Is it some special occasion? Why is he being so agreeable? The Duke placed his pen down on the table and let out a quiet breath. Then, almost casually, he said that at this rate, he felt like he might end up burying his nose in her neck. Could she really not do something about the scent? Rosalia groaned in frustration. Without another word, she walked straight to the window and flung it open. She pointed toward the wide panes and remarked that they could simply air out the room. After all, what else were such enormous windows for? The Duke was left speechless. From where he stood, all he could do was watch her, strong, unbothered, completely herself, and admire her from afar. Now at Rebellio Grand Ducal Estate, Antonio knelt before the Grand Duke, recounting everything he knew. As he spoke, the throne prince pressed a hand to his forehead, clearly irritated. When Antonio finished, the throne prince spoke coldly. He remarked that Antonio must have been devastated, believing his own sister had betrayed him. Who would have expected such a thing? Antonio agreed, insisting that was everything he knew. The throne prince replied that of course, a reward had been promised, and of course, it would be given. At that moment, guards stepped forward and seized Antonio. Panic flooded his face as he cried out, reminding the throne prince of the promised reward. The throne prince sneered, calling him a pathetic worm. He remarked that Antonio should have let the Duke kill him in the street. It would have been a far less painful death. Antonio begged for mercy. As the throne prince listened to the desperate pleas, a thought crossed his mind. An opportunity presents itself, he thought. A chance to get rid of the Duke by linking him to that wench. Irritated by Antonio's cries, he ordered the guards to silence him and cut off his head. Calmly, he lifted his glass and took a sip. Antonio's screams echoed briefly before being swallowed by silence. Back at the Duke's residence, the Duke was informed by Rosalia that she would be going to the imperial palace. She asked why. Rosalia explained that Her Highness, the Crown Princess, had been Nadia's patron. She needed to be informed of Nadia's passing. The Duke immediately objected. The palace was dangerous crawling with the Grand Duke's people. On top of that, Rosalia still couldn't fully control her scent. He said he would deliver the news himself. Rosalia refused. From what she had seen, the Crown Princess would be startled if someone else brought the news. She hadn't wanted others to know she was collecting paintings and had seemed genuinely saddened. And no matter how dangerous the palace was, it would be difficult for them to act immediately. Besides, she added quietly, the scent only seemed to be a problem when she was near him. The Duke sighed, conceding. He remarked that it wasn't as if she would listen to him anyway. Still, he warned her to be careful and to stay away from the Grand Duke. Rosalia promised she would and stepped out of the room. As she left, the Duke told her to be safe. She has reached the imperial palace. It stood grand and imposing. Rosalia stood before the Crown Princess, who spoke with sorrow. She lamented the loss of a brilliant artist, saying Nadia's work had held special meaning for her. Rosalia agreed. For her as well. She then presented the painting she had brought with her, one of the final pieces from Nadia's Sky collection. She explained that the remaining works would be displayed in the school being built in Algrisha. The Crown Princess admired the painting, calling it beautiful. She hesitated, unsure if she deserved to keep something so precious. Rosalia replied that if she were Nadia, she would have wanted her last painting to go to the Crown Princess, the first person who had ever recognized her work. With a saddened smile, the Crown Princess thanked her. She expressed concern for Antonio, remarking that she had never experienced the sorrow of losing a dear friend. Rosalia assured her she was fine, even as she tried to wipe away tears that weren't there. The Crown Princess then handed her an envelope. Rosalia immediately declined, saying the painting had not been meant for payment. The Crown Princess replied that Nadia wouldn't have wanted that either, but asked if she remembered the title of the first piece she had bought. Freedom. She explained that the amount inside the envelope was enough to buy that. It was all she could do. After a pause, Rosalia accepted it. On her way back, Rosalia stared at the envelope. If she handed this money to His Grace, all her debts would be cleared. So why did her heart feel so heavy? She had thought she would feel nothing but happiness once the debt was paid. But when everything was over, where would she go? Just then, a man approached her from behind and asked if she was Mr. Antonio. She confirmed it. He informed her that His Highness, the Crown Prince, had summoned her. The Crown Prince? She followed him, unable to refuse such an order. She was led to a grand hall and told to wait. Confused, Rosalia realized this wasn't the Crown Prince's palace. She had never been here before. When she turned back, the man was gone. The room was silent. Her gaze fell upon piles of documents and books, important ones. Too important. Her breath caught. These were top-secret imperial documents. Something was terribly wrong. She turned to leave, and at that moment the Grand Duke entered. He coldly asked how a mere servant had entered a restricted area. Then, without hesitation, he ordered his soldiers to arrest the arrogant servant who dared touch imperial secrets.